Well, I was definitely curious about Uncle Tom's Cabana. I had a funny feeling this was going to be a little bit awkward, and I have to say it absolutely is. This is the 1947 MGM cartoon directed by Tex Avery and written by Heck Allen, and it obviously parodies Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. And in fact, one of our protagonists, who ends up playing the piano and narrating the story, says that this is the real story of Uncle Tom's Cabin. This is the story he's going to tell, and what follows is obviously a parody of the story. And in terms of, well, let's get the good things out of the way. In terms of the narrative structure, it works well. Of having a story within a story, that's always something that I find to be a really good device and gives a narrative, a cartoon, a little bit more substance. So that worked well. The style of animation was consistent. There were some decent songs in it in terms of the melody, if not the lyrics. Um, Anything else that was good about it? I don't think so. I mean, the narration was crisp and clear. The voice acting was very well done. Voice actors include Sara Berner, Ruby Dandridge, Paul Frees, Imogene Lynn, and Will Wright, according to IMDb. The animation of various characters is some of the most caricatured I've ever seen of African American individuals. And I don't necessarily think it was done to be offensive, but I think that's definitely the case. In fact, after I finished watching it, I had a look online to see what the reception was like. There's an interesting couple of paragraphs on Wikipedia with a quote from the African American Weekly Pittsburgh Courier. That the quote basically says this animation is an outrage. Why do certain characters have to be so stereotypical? Why do African Americans have to constantly be ridiculed like this? And it's really interesting having a quote from roughly the time this was released, what, 1947? So that's about 7 years later. Obviously, when something is pulled nowadays, it's like, are you just being too sensitive? Was it really that offensive? What's it like at the time? Was it that offensive? But having a quote from very near the publication date or the release date is pretty invaluable, and it just shows that the people who should be offended or who could be offended by it clearly were offended by it. And I think that's the most powerful review you can ever give for this kind of cartoon, because I can sit here and say, well, actually I thought the animation style was uncomfortable and the characters were heavily stereotyped and they had some certain phrases that they used that I felt were done in a way to mock them. But what value is there, in my opinion, other than saying, yeah, this cartoon is a bit problematic? But having those opinions of people who actually have been affected by it, I think is always really interesting. Um, and also brave as well. I feel like at the time, not a lot of people were willing to speak out against this kind of thing, which obviously over the years has progressed, which is why we don't get cartoons like this anymore. But yeah, if you watch this cartoon, which I think you should do, just because for historical value, I always think that no cartoon should be banned, because unless it's like sexually explicit but aimed at children, that kind of thing, yeah. But other than that, I feel like cartoons shouldn't be banned because that's how we learn from them. And this is definitely worth watching as an example of how not to how not to do it. And if you do that, check out the quote on Wikipedia. It's definitely really interesting. Uncle Tom's Cabana is not good. There are obviously good things about it, like I said, the narration, the voice acting, um, consistency. The style is very consistent, and I think an intention, and I think it met that intention. Whether or not the intention was honourable is an entirely different question. Uncle Tom's Cabana is obviously not a great cartoon, but historically probably pretty important with how far we've come.